We were supposed to start already. Okay. Welcome everybody to tonight's special council meeting. To begin this evening, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which we are gathered here this evening, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So just to give a bit of context for this special council meeting, this special council meeting is to deal with the undisposed business remaining from the last council meeting, which was held on the 21st of May. The special council meeting went through the regular processes of being advertised in The Age and on the council website. So membership tonight is as listed in the agenda. We are expecting Councillor Lawrence to be here, so I'm sure he's not far away. So there are no apologies. Item 3 is disclosures of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures? No disclosures, thank you. We'll move now to item 4, notices of motion. 4.1, Preston Market Heritage Study and peer reviews. Councillor Greco. Just...
Is that better? Yep, great. I'm going to be moving an alternate motion to the motion that appears there.
Yes.
Councillors, I've distributed this motion quite late and it should be in your email box, but it's also been sent to our officers, to Katia, and hopefully it would appear up on the board. So I'll give councillors a moment to read the alternate motion.
Is it possible to get that motion up onto the screen? Okay.
May I also have made some copies, so I could also distribute some copies if I could.
If you have some copies, you could pass around to councillors so that we could look at them now.
Can we just get some clarity? Is this the motion that was emailed to councillors at 5:27?
5:28, yes.
5:28
yep.
p.m?
That's the one.
Yep, thank you.
Happy to second it.
If we will just wait till all councillors can have a look at it before we actually start the debate.
Can you get that on the screen, please, Carly? Can you get that on the screen? Before 5:30 could be better. It's not contrary. It's not opposite.
Have all councillors got a copy of it and have read it?
Yes.
Councillor McCarthy?
Look, I'm just literally reading this because it's only just been sent through to us.
Okay, well, we'll take some...
I just would have ask a question before the mover and seconder speak, if I can.
You've got a question?
Yep.
Yes.
Which is if we can get some officer comment. I'm assuming that officers have seen it.
Or they're just reading it as well, yep.
They're just reading it? I just would like to get some officers' comment in relation to the consistency of this motion in relation to the item that council dealt with at the last meeting.
Could you repeat your question, Councillor McCarthy?
If I can get an officer's comment in relation to where this proposed alternative is consistent and where it may be inconsistent with the motion moved just at the last council meeting, which is effectively actually this current meeting because it's a continuation.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson, do you want to comment? We might just take some time so that it can be digested.
Yeah, just got it.
Mayor, if it assists, I could provide some context to the motion.
No, but there's a question then being asked of the officers. You'll have a chance to speak to the motion when we get to the debate. We're just seeking clarification.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor, if your question is it inconsistent with previous decisions, specifically the matter that was resolved last week, so if there's any element of this, I don't believe so. The resolution last week talked about not seeking a heritage overlay at this time, and so this would be a different time, so it might be that Council wants to reconsider that, you know, given the passage of time. And the rest of it is relatively consistent with the previous. It's a different language, but the same outcome, similar outcome.
Okay, we might now go to the debate. So that motion was moved by Councillor Greco and seconded by Councillor Williams. So Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, first of all, I apologise to councillors for putting this alternate motion so late in the piece. It's just that I've been very busy with other matters and I haven't had a chance to do this earlier. Councillors, as you can see, the motion there, it's basically into 3 points. What's in this motion, councillors, is basically it's been lifted out of the heritage report in terms of the key findings and recommendations, and also parts of it, that is part 1. Part 2 has been, again, lifted out from the peer review that we received, which is attached to the which is also attached to the heritage report. And part 3 is deals with applying for a heritage listing, which is something that I mentioned at the last meeting, but unfortunately what we talked about at the last meeting has been invalidated because of the council procedures. So in relation to the first point, basically what it says there is some of the key recommendations that have come out of the heritage study. And what's most important there to consider, one is in relation to seeking a heritage overlay over Preston Market, and particularly now that the report has been released, and I know that this was a concern that some councillors raised in relation to that when the heritage report, if the heritage report was to be released, that it would have exposed the market to some of its heritage values. So what that first part of that motion tries to do is try to seek for some protections, given that the heritage report has been released, so that we could immediately look at applying a heritage overlay so that we can protect the future potential heritage value associated with the market. Also, if you go down the list there, it talks about there's a whole series of things there, and those things there, if you like, are things that have been mentioned in the heritage study. And I know that councillors in a previous debate talked about how the reference group that's been established by the VPA in partnership with the council may deal with some of the matters in relation to writing up a new incorporated plan. But I feel that these types of matters here do not fall strictly, if you like, within the jurisdiction of an incorporated plan. So they're things that would need to be taken up by the council directly, and because the incorporated plan is a planning instrument, it doesn't necessarily go into the sort of projects that have been suggested here in the as part of the recommendation. So I urge councillors to really consider these ideas. I think they're quite attractive ideas. They're ideas that go to the sense of protecting the market. You know, we all say, again, I keep to repeat this, we all say that we're champions of the market. We all claim to want to support the market. These are actually initiatives that actually highlight the value of the market to our community. And I think that we should take stock of these ideas and actually try to put these things in place. Also, what the Heritage Report talks about, also what the peer review talks about, and also other advice that I'm not privy to disclose because it is confidential in relation confidential information that we received, all highlight the point that we should not give up. we should also seek further information, further reports, further studies, in order to put our best case forward in relation to achieving heritage protections for our market. So that point D there goes to those matters. And finally, point C is in relation to seeking heritage listing with Victorian Heritage Register.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
Heritage comes in all sorts of ways, and it gives protection of a place. From the report, there are different forms of ways that we can protect and give heritage to a framework. In protecting the Preston market, particularly we need to look at socially protecting the Preston market. It's not always from some people see it that protecting heritage would be planning. In this case, it's more about getting heritage put on the Preston market or looking at different ways of protecting the Preston market, especially socially. It's a place of gathering, and that should be protected. So whatever forms of planning that does happen in the future at Preston market, that if we have some sort of heritage protection that a person can look at who has specialty, I guess, ability that has heritage qualifications that can ensure that the Preston market is developed in a way that will still include and keep it as a social gathering place. Now, I'm not sure from whether it was cut off from last week, whether we can get our officers to maybe elaborate on the different types of heritage. That might be a good way of going forward, because...
So if we would just finish, maybe you just finish your time, and then we can ask a question of the officers.
Well, that's pretty much, because my fellow councillor Gaetano has already mentioned the amendment that he wants to bring forward.
Okay, thank you. Now, did you want to put a question to the officers so that the officers could respond? I
think it's important that those who possibly not only councillors, but I meant the people on the internet that or intranet that hasn't read the report, that our officers can actually explain the different types of heritage.
Might hand that over to Mr. Rudd. Yes?
I'll just explain succinctly what would happen if there was a heritage overlay provided.
Do you want to stand up and hold it?
Yeah. What would happen if there was a heritage overlay provided is that there are state suites of controls that would apply. So it would apply internal controls. It would mean things would require a planning permit. It would mean that things like solar installations on the roof would require a planning permit, where they don't now. The only way that can be varied, which I need to make clear to the councillors, is why the only way these things can be varied is through an incorporated plan, not through the overlay. So simply putting an overlay on it will trigger a whole host of permit requirements that are not there now. So it's not to say the site's not valuable or anything like that. Our suggestion was, and our recommendation was, that you look at these things in context through the process. So the other question that was asked was about the Heritage Register. So that's a tool provided by Heritage Victoria, and that's a registration where you've got to establish a case of state significance. So, and that's one of the things the report talks about, is that case is yet to be proven.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rudd. Councillor McCarthy had his hand up, and then I'll go to Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I just get some clarity then, just in relation to the resolution that Council moved at at this meeting, but the first half of this meeting last week. Our resolution was to refer the heritage study and all relating documents to the VPA, the Victorian Planning Authority, for consideration. Is it officers' understanding that the VPA, as the body that is actually now charged by the Minister to recommend on integrated controls, would be considering our heritage report and the question of state significance as part of their consideration? Is that part of their terms of reference?
They have certainly confirmed that they will consider all the information that we've provided to them, and heritage as part of their discussions.
So can I just ask a supplementary to that?
Yes.
In the process, thank you for that. In the process of them considering the merits of the heritage study and whether heritage controls should be introduced as part of new planning controls for the site, would they also consider the question about state significance and whether this should be referred to Heritage Victoria?
We haven't put that specific question to them.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor, and I apologise for being a tad late when you wrote it, since we've got longer.
Welcome back.
Maybe more cars. Just had a question. Obviously, I'm sort of filling in some gaps in my knowledge. We have now an alternate motion that I've just been handed and read.
So you're asking a question, you're not... Sorry, we'll stop the clock. Are you asking a question?
I'm asking a question.
Yeah, okay. Well, yep.
I'm not talking to the motion.
That's okay.
Just on the previous memo that was sent round,
Yes.
it had a couple of paragraphs on a notice of motion.
Yes.
And then it has reference to 3 dot points
Yes.
that include writing to local members about the intention of
Yes.
the council. Has that action already happened?
No, so just to give you some context, the top paragraph is the notice of motion as listed in the agenda from the 21st of May. On the 21st of May, the bottom 3 points was the motion that was moved by Councillor Greco and not the motion that was listed in the agenda. But because that meeting was not continued in time within the 4-hour limit, we have to start from the start of that notice of motion. So the motion that was moved by Councillor Greco has no standing in this meeting, and so Councillor Greco has decided to move the motion that was distributed on the other piece of paper and not in the memo, and the one that he moved last meeting.
Okay. Then could I propose a small amendment?
Yes.
To the alternate motion?
So the one that was handed around, not on the memo. Yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Simply that we have a point 4, which is in fact the point 2 in the bottom of the other memo, which is the rights to local and federal members of Parliament read Council's intention to lodge an application with the Victorian Heritage Register, etc.
Does the mover accept that?
Yes, I accept.
And the seconder?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, that's now incorporated into the substantive motion. It's this. It's just point 2. So we'll just add that to the motion on screen. Okay. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? We've heard from the mover and seconder. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, the alternate motion, and congratulate Councillor Greco for bringing this important matter back to us again, obviously since last week, and putting some thought and effort into an even more refined motion here. I will just not reiterate what's already been spoken about by the mover and the seconder, except to underscore that the Preston Market isn't simply part of Melbourne's retail history, it's actually an integral part of the expression of multiculturalism in the city of Darebin, so it has special significance to all of us. And just briefly on the amendment I've moved there, while obviously the intent of this motion, if passed, is quite clear, and there will be actions that will flow from it that are real and will actually add to the battle to save the Preston Market. Not everyone looks at every minute that comes out of the council, and I think it is important that we write, when we take action on this matter, directly to all the federal and local MPs to underscore that we are taking action on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers? No, there's no further speakers, so I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour and all of those against? That motion is lost. Moving now to item 4. No, you can't. Item 4.2 is advocacy against cuts to the Status Resolution Support Services, or the SRSS program. Councillor Greco. 4.2, yep. Just turn on your microphone.
I move that motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second it.
That was, I think, Councillor McCarthy had his hand up. Yeah? Sorry. Councillor McCarthy, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Greco.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Look, again, this was an item that unfortunately we were not able to discuss last week, or we discussed it but we were not able to. It was invalidated because we ran out of time. I noticed that last week councillors voted against, which I think are the two critical points in this motion, which are point number 7 and point number 8, which relate to...
Sorry, Councillor Greco, I'll just pull you up on there. We didn't vote against them because we're considering this motion now for the first time.
Okay,
So we didn't...
Okay. Well,
so we'll just go to the substantive motion.
I saw indications that people were concerned about point number 7 and point number 8, which was really, frankly, to my disappointment, because whilst we look at these other points from point number 1 to point number 5, which are points of highlighting, writing letters and things like that, which is all fine. We need to do that sort of stuff. But I think, councillors, we need to dig a bit deeper. We need to sometimes put our money in our pockets and actually do something in relation to supporting refugees and asylum seekers. It's not enough, councillors, to write to Prime Ministers or to write to Ministers of State and things like that, whilst that is very important. But what we have to look at as a council, given that we are part of the welcoming zone for refugees, given our legacy, our history, our rhetoric in relation to supporting refugees and asylum seekers, we need to do something, councillors. We need to do something that's within our control, and things that we need to do, that actually have proven to be quite successful in the past that we have done in relation to, if you look at point number 7, and I note that in the audience we had a member of the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council in relation to the Darebin Asylum Seeker Support Project, which is a very successful project that the council, together with the Darebin Ethnic Community Council, conducted in relation to supporting asylum seekers and refugees within our city. And also, if you look at point number 8, councillors, it's about supporting the relevant agencies in relation to employment programs, because what these cuts represent by the federal government is actually taking the lifeline away from asylum seekers and refugees in terms of their subsistence. So what they'll be doing, therefore, would be that they'll be looking for ways to get by, and we need to work with other agencies in and around our locality in terms of supporting refugees and asylum seekers. Again, we have a lot at stake here, councillors, because I could say that right around the table here, the 9 councillors, we are very supportive of refugees, and this is our opportunity to actually not only express our protest to the federal government, but actually for council to actually dig deep and actually do something of a practical nature.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. Look, I second everything that Councillor Greco says in relation to this council's enduring commitment and passion for work with asylum seekers and refugees and other vulnerable people in our community. I just want to recognise one of the leaders in our community of one of the community organisations, Francis Trimboli. Great to have you here from Diverse. I just would make a point to say that one of the things that's very interesting about Darebin is that it's not just the council, in fact, that does work in this space. It's not just Darebin Ethnic Communities Council, which does extraordinary work in this space, but it's also our neighbourhood houses and Diverse being one of the key organisations that supports people in emergency need. And I want to just pick up on the points that Councillor Greco has raised here, because when there is a cut to a service that supports asylum seekers who are in our community or are reliant upon other assistance, that feeling and that those cuts are actually felt well and truly beyond those individuals, because they impact a whole range of other people too. So when we talk about our advocacy, we also recognise that we are, and our community regularly steps in this space, and we must continue to do so in both a practical and a vocal context. I just want to pick up on point 7 of Councillor Greco's proposed motion, which is that it's a consideration of reinvigorating a very successful program that we have done in partnership with Darebin Ethnic Communities Council. I'm really interested about how we can do this, but not just council, but of course also potentially our houses and other organisations in the community which work very closely at a grassroots level and can sometimes do amazing partnership building with people that we will not otherwise reach. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the motion and to see it go forward.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Yes, I'd like to ask whether we could vote on each of these matters individually as we did the other day. And in doing so, I would suggest that some of these things and some of these areas of advocacy are ones that we can support and ones that we have supported for a very long time. And I commend Councillor Greco for his ongoing advocacy and being a champion for work in this space. However, I believe that there are some areas of this motion that go beyond advocacy and that we need to think about the role of good process in creating new initiatives and investing our community's resources. There are dozens of people waiting to come into this chamber to make submissions to our budget process, hoping that their submissions will be seriously considered by our council. And they have come here tonight as part of a rigorous process, which meant that they put in a budget submission some weeks ago. They were invited to submit. In the meantime, council officers considered that submission, costed it, and made recommendations. I'm most uncomfortable with the idea that we could do things here tonight off the cuff without having any costings, without having an understanding of the implications for staff workload in the organisation or the impact that decisions that we made here might have on other components of the council plan that we seek to deliver. And that's why, whilst I admire the advocacy and I fully support it, I think that where activities go beyond advocacy and where they might divert significant resources from other important parts of our council plan that we agreed together, they shouldn't be supported, and that efforts to undertake work in this space should be initiated through the normal and reasonable processes that mean that there's some due diligence that occurs.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, did you want to speak? Oh, hang on, before you speak, Councillor Rennie requested that that when we take the vote that the motion is considered in all of its parts individually, so we will do that once we get to the vote. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, just a question on that
just
process.
Can you hold up your mic? Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Just a question on that that process you just
yes.
proposing.
Yep.
So we're going to consider 8 motions, are we? And vote on 8?
8 individually. So we'll put each part to the vote. We won't debate on them individually. We'll debate. It's one debate for this motion, but then we will vote on each of the parts. So that is in relation to that is allowed under clause 26. 7 of the local law, which means which says a councillor may request at any time before a vote is taken on a motion, which is in 2 or more parts, that each part be put to the vote separately. The chairperson may grant or refuse such a request.
So we don't get to vote on that process as councillors?
According to the local law, it's up to the chair to either grant or refuse that request. I just wrote out, I read the local law out word for word.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if I'm making a point of order. I suppose I will attempt to.
Okay, what's your point of order?
We have a budget submission meeting, and this to me seems like an inefficient waste of time into.
Okay, I'll take your point of so. I take your point.
Which will disadvantage the community.
I take your point of order, Councillor Lawrence. I don't believe that it is a valid point of order because I just read out the part of the local law in which Councillor Rennie has requested that the vote be taken separately. It is not it is in line with the local law, so it isn't a point of order, and I have granted that. So we need to move on. So are there any further speakers?
Yeah, just a point of order,
Yes.
Mayor. I take your point about that you have the discretion to
Yes.
to do that, but as councillors, we could also. Is it possible for councillors also to express dissent against your directive? Yeah.
So there is.
I just want to point that out to councillors, that there is an opportunity for councillors to express dissent against your directive.
Someone is happy to move that motion. I will point out that Councillor Lawrence says that will take more time to vote on each of them individually. Going through this process is also taking more time. So would someone like to either move a motion of dissent, or would someone like to speak to the motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a motion of dissent in that point of order. I believe it is very simple for councillors to amend the two elements they don't like, and we can do it much quicker.
Just one moment.
Mayor, I second the motion of dissent.
Hang on just one moment. We're just working through the process. Okay, so there was a motion put forward by Councillor Lawrence that the chairperson's ruling be dissented from, and that was seconded by Councillor Greco. And so I will now leave the chair, and I'll hand over to the Deputy Mayor to continue chairing this motion.
Same old, eh? It's like listening to the monitor.
Councillor Lawrence, under section 52, dissension from the chairperson's ruling, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Madam Mayor, I've already outlined in my question my arguments on this, and I'm happy to let that rest.
Okay. Would you like to respond, Councillor?
I think I make it quite clear when I made the ruling that according to the local law, it is up to the chairperson to either accept or refuse the request that was made by Councillor Lawrence, and I decided to accept that, and that is well within the local law.
Now I'd like to put it to the vote that the chairperson's ruling be dissented from. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is lost. I now welcome the Mayor to the chair.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to the motion that we are currently debating? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Melissa. So I also want to commend Councillor Greco for putting this motion forward. I think it's absolutely horrendous that the federal government is taking away income support and housing from up to 100 refugees and asylum seekers from Manus and Nauru who are currently in Australia for medical treatment. I think the two major parties show an astonishing lack of humanity on this issue, and I fully support the intention of the motion. But we have a room full of people here tonight who followed a process to have their submissions heard. And I think the council that we are is one that goes through a budget process formally. And I don't see that points 7 and 8 of this motion will meet that, as it will have some money tied to it. And I don't like to do things on the fly. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers? No. Councillor Greco, would you like, there was some...
yeah, just as a right of reply,
yep.
Look, I'm disappointed that the motion was not considered. Excuse me. I'm just disappointed that the motion were not considered as a package, but I respect the will of the council in order to go through each item as it's there. Again, the point that was made, just to rebut some of the points that were made in the debate. Yes, this is about advocacy. That's not an issue about the advocacy parts of the motion. But I thought as a council we're a bit beyond advocacy. It's not a question of just advocating about things. We do that, and we do that well. In this space, we not only have advocated, but we've actually done things. What I'm suggesting in this motion is nothing new. It probably could be done within the existing budget resources that are allocated. We have a lot of people in the organisations that have expertise about this. We have the Darebin Ethnic Communities Council, who already has a process ready to roll out in relation to this type of activity. So I dispute the issue about there having to be extra resources dedicated to doing something like this, because the formula is already there, councillors. It just needs to be rolled out. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and goodwill amongst council officers and expertise in order to make this thing happen. So I think it's a bit of, frankly, it's a bit of furphy to say that it will require enormous resources and it will take resources away from many other things. I want to remind councillors that we have a $14 million budget surplus, so there is sufficient funds, even if, and I doubt in this case here, whether we need to dip into those funds. I'm sure that the members of the audience that have come here tonight for submissions would want to know that. So, councillors, it's pretty straightforward. We've had a long-standing commitment in relation to this. All we need to do is roll out the formula that we already have.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. That's time
for this constituency.
Councillor Lawrence, we're up to the vote now. We've just heard from the right of reply, so we go straight to the vote.
The question,
yes,
Madam Mayor. Just on point 7 and 8, obviously there's been debate on this issue amongst councillors that I've not been part of. Could I seek through the Mayor or the CEO what the actual process is from these two verbs in point 7 and 8, which is considers reinvigorating and considers supporting?
Okay.
Would that require extra reports to council? I'm just asking.
Ms Wilkinson?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Lawrence, at a minimum it would involve a councillor briefing, so we'd provide background to council on what the program was, the project was, and the benefits of the program. Consultation with DEC, obviously, and come back to council with a briefing and then potentially a decision depending on the way in which the discussion would occur. But it's not something that is part of the current work program, so this would be in addition to the work program. But that's really what would be involved initially.
Okay, Madam Mayor, just a supplementary question, because I'm not familiar with that verb being used.
If you could turn your microphone.
Sorry,
yep.
I'm not familiar with that verb being used in a motion. Normally we have recommend to a budget process or
yes,
a call for a report or whatever. So I'm just trying to catch up. So we're actually not making a final decision in those 2 points. That's my question.
Ms Wilkinson?
Not the way that a motion has been constructed, no, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll vote on each of the individual parts of this motion. So I'll put point 1 to the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 2, all those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 3, all those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 4, all those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 5, all those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 6, all those in favour? Motion is carried. Point 7, all those in favour? And against? The motion is carried. Point 8, all those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. Point 8, all those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. Okay, moving now on to 5, reports of standing committees. There is none. Item 6, records of assemblies of councillors. 6.1, assemblies of councillors held. Moved by Councillor Williams and seconded by Councillor Amir. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Item 7 is reports by Mayor and Councillor.
Happy to move.
That's moved by Councillor Williams and seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour? Motion is carried. And that brings us to the close of our special council meeting. We will just have to do, I think, a quick moving of the furniture and then we'll start the hearings of submissions as soon as we can. Sorry for the wait and just bear with us for a moment.